All right, good afternoon, LA time. Good evening, East Coast time. This is Scott Morganroth here on the Sports Exchange podcast. Glad to have my co-host, Louis Adio Weiss, here on the program. How you doing, Louis?
What's going on?
Oh, I don't know. Just trying to get my East Coast bearings straight. Meanwhile, we're going to lead it off tonight here with Damon Knight. And Damon, I know you had an opportunity to go ahead and write for the South Florida Tribune. Why don't you explain to our listeners what your story was about?
Yes, Happy New Year, by the way, Scoop and Lewis. It's nice, seeing you guys again and hearing from you. I wanted to just go right into it. So AJ Hinch, if you haven't known, and Jeff Lunau, the Astros manager and GM, had both been fired due to sign stealing allegations. It's unfortunate news, but it's head turning for sure, and they suffer the consequences for their actions.
So when you talk about the Astros, to me, nobody will put an asterisk on the championship because Major League Baseball does not do it.
Yes.
But boy, doesn't it taint the accomplishment?
Certainly it does in fans' eyes. But for their GM Jim Crane, he doesn't believe that the World Series is tainted. Yes, they did steal signals from teams and such like that, but talent on the field alone won them that World Series despite those allegations. And so, but they're still holding themselves accountable, and that's why he made the decision in a press conference to decide to fire these two men, because that's not the model that they want in their locker room, especially in their culture and their organization. So they did the right thing, and I applaud them for it.
I mean, so I'm a bit of contrarian in the sense, look, Hinch, the statement from MLB, and I have it right here, is really relative to what you just said, Damon, and this is what MLB came out and said. Neither one of them started this, but neither one of them did anything about it.
Yes.
So Hinch knew that this was going on, and while a report did leak that he was trying to break the camera that was set up in center field, he kind of just let it continue to go on and fester, and that's why he's fired. From a baseball perspective, I'm a little upset that players weren't reprimanded for this because we know a lot of them are responsible for this. It was a player-devised scheme. That's what the report said. So I agree in firing both of them. You don't want people who were there when it happened and kind of aided in the process of this, one of the bigger scandals that we've seen in recent sports memory happening. You want those guys to go, but players need to be definitely, penalized for this. I don't know, Scott, do you agree with me?
Well, I think the players have to show a fair amount of accountability, but at what point or another will Major League Baseball go that far, realizing that the people that are of higher authority are going to take the slap on the wrist? Case in point, remember the New Orleans Saints situation where Sean Payton got banned for a year, but I didn't see a whole lot of players that really got disciplined to the level that Payton did. So, so you're seeing a situation where the coach, whether it's a coach or a higher up, so to speak, an authority is going to take the brunt of the whole thing. And as a result, that seems to be the pattern that it looks like we're seeing here. There's a lot more elements that will be uncovered over the course of the next several days.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like a flower where there's so many petals and layers that you could kind of peel off to this, and so many different angles that you can look at it at. I think the Astros consist of so many really great players who are, for lack of a better word, they're on Hall of Fame trajectories early on in their careers, and to be implicated, even though we said it's a player-devised scheme, could really tarnish the possibility of whether or not when these guys retire in 15, 20 years, what their chances of getting to Cooperstown look like. I agree that those two figureheads should have been, penalized for this, but at the end of the day, if the players were the ones that devised this scheme, they're the ones that truly need to see some punishment to pay for their actions, to know that this is unacceptable.
True, but the question is I don't think that this would affect any Hall of Fame balloting amongst the players, because first of all, not many of them have been talked about to begin with, so I don't think I would quite go in that direction. I wouldn't. But when you talk about the implications for A.J. Finch,
Hinch,
Hinch, all right, FH, whatever.
Bird, whatever.
I can tell you right now, the word blackballed is something that he could very likely end up getting. He may not see another managerial job ever, and that to me speaks volumes. And for that matter, Joey Toro won't either. What's that?
So he's definitely flinching. So
there you go. Good segue. That's for sure. But yeah, the word blackballed is something that's going to come into play.
Yeah.
I mean, the Astros have been when something like this happens in the manner that it does, then it's a reflection on the whole organization. And this thing runs so many layers beyond the manager. We got Jeff Ludlow, who also got bounced at the same time, right, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, and, it certainly taints, Cora's reputation and Beltran. Beltran was a part of the Astros team, as their bench coach in 2017. And so, it's just like you can't build a reputation around people that you can't trust. And so this is why they did this. And so, I applaud them for it, like I said. And, going forward, I think they're going to make the right decisions as far as what they want to represent as an organization.
Well, you have to. I mean, number one, this is an organization that a few years back only won, 55 ball games and climbed up the ladder to get to where they're at. And all of a sudden, now because of this scandal that we have here, is finding that their reputation is taking a hit. And they played some great baseball. I feel bad because they have a lot of great players on that team.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, those accomplishments are being overshadowed by this ridiculous situation.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, and to link it back to home, that looks bad on Justin Verlander, too, as well, and that's unfortunate. The guy works so hard to get to where he is, and he has this shadowing over his career, and so I'm not saying he's guilty of anything, but, he's always going to be linked to that team, and so that's unfortunate.
Well, Damon, why I don't think it necessarily affects him is this. Justin Verlander has the accolades minus his World Series performance to be in the Hall of Fame, but if you remember, 2017 was the last year we had a waiver trade deadline following the non-waiver on July 31st. Verlander wasn't acquired until August 31st. The sign stealing started at the end of April, beginning of May. He had nothing to do with it. So I don't think it necessarily affects him at all. I think he's still going to be able to go into Houston and never have to pay for a meal again, even though he can't get an out in the sixth inning in the World Series. So I don't think it affects him at all. Again, I think, though, some players should have been penalized for this. Jose Altuve is on a trajectory right now where I could see him in 5 years being a possible guy who has the caliber to be a Hall of Fame. But now it's like, he won the MVP award that year. Most people are forgetting this. It's not being talked about. How much of that season is legitimate? And he had great years before that. He won 3 batting titles before then.
Yes.
How legitimate is that MVP season, though, when, some of those hits and home runs came off the strength of somebody banging on a garbage can in a June game in Minute Maid, and he's hitting a double in the left field gap. Those are important. I think they matter.
It's hard to tell. It's like instant replay of football. You don't know whether or not he broke the play unless it's visually clear.
Good example.
And so it's unfortunate. It's he said, she said, and so, you hope that pure instinct that him being a great hitter took over situations and not being aided by cheating, by banging on garbage cans and saying, "Hey, that this guy's going to throw you a curveball." Mm-hmm. Let the guy on pure instinct hit the ball.
Well, I'll say one thing about baseball, though, guys. These are smart cheaters. They got this stuff down to a science, don't they? I mean, they really do. If you really break down the logistics of this whole thing, these are smart cheaters.
Yeah, they did it like a Cold War American politician, just hiding it out there somewhere. You didn't know where the hell it was. I mean,
really?
Well, they got to be perfect. They got to be perfect at doing it because there's cameras everywhere, and so those guys are stiff in the locker in the locker room and in the dugout, just being like, we got to do this way, and we got to chew gum a certain way, or we got to tip our cap or something. They're constantly figuring out ways to do it.
I mean, think about it. You're banging garbage cans to make noise, and you're really doing it with the intent that I'm trying to send you a message, and now we're bringing in garbage cans into this whole thing.
But they even had further, like there was further speculation this postseason that they were whistling in the dugout to get pitcher signs. Like, the problem is 2017 is the outlier, the worst instance of this occurring, the worst thing that has ever been done in means to steal signs. But the fact that it's carried on for 2 additional postseasons, there's evidence of them doing whistling in 2018, garbage can banging in 2018, and now whistling in 2019. Like, what's going to be next? Like, if Alex Bregman's wearing a dress, he's throwing a slider on a 3-2 count in the dugout. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, but the problem is they're building a reputation that extends itself now 3 seasons. When they were a wild card team in 2015, that wasn't a thing. Hinch was doing it the right way. They worked, they tanked, they rebuilt. They had an ace at the time in Dallas Keuchel, and they got to the playoffs. And now it's just they have this reputation as they're cheaters. They're Barry Bonds, 25 guys around, it seems like.
Well, here, let's point out the fact that this has been a very good offseason for Houston with Garrett Cole signing with the Yankees. And then it makes you kind of wonder a little bit. Charlie Morton goes to the Tampa Bay Rays.
Yeah, last
so I
season.
don't even know whether or not he went there to be the Rays' primary pitcher, whether he knew there was something going on there that he wanted no part of. And let's just take it to another level with Mike Fiers sounding off on this whole thing, too.
Yeah, somebody's upset.
And, you know, that could have been the reason why Keuchel, it took so long for Keuchel to find a job, you know, and so who knows. So...
Well, a lot of Keuchel came down to the fact that Scott Boras wanted $120 million for a pitcher with declining velocity and peripheral numbers that weren't good. But Fiers sounded like a guy who was upset he was left off the postseason roster. Not many people talk about that, but Mike Fiers wasn't on that 2017 roster. He's also the guy who drilled Giancarlo Stanton in the face. So this guy has a reputation that precedes it. I mean, again, I guess you could say the Astros got Cole in their stocking. Somebody bang a comedy drum for me. They get this terrible suspension levied on them, and they lose the best pitcher that franchise has seen in the past 5 years. It goes to the team that they knocked out in the championship series 2 of the last 3 years.
All right, one other note I want to mention here. We only have a few minutes to go here in the segment, okay? Anytime you have a scandal, who do you think is the one person that's going to sound off on it more than anybody?
The owner.
No. Pete Rose.
Oh, well, there you go.
Well, I said one person. I didn't say the owner.
Yeah.
I knew that was a trick question. I didn't even get the baseball get thrown off his game. Anyways, Pete Rose references this that the Astros cheating was worse than my bets, meaning that he bet on his players to wins and shows confidence in them. Not to say that it's a better part of two evils, but anytime you needed a cheating opinion, you could always count on Cheating Pete to give you that opinion.
Not Charlie Hustle, it's Cheating Hustle, I guess, now.
Or Cheating Pete.
Yeah. I like that one a lot. Should be a restaurant.
Not bad for a guy that's only had 4 hours of sleep taking a red eye from L.A., right, guys?
Yeah.
Don't worry, I'll get better as the week goes on after I figure out what time zone I'm really in.
Yeah. What stadium in.
So what's your take on that, Damon, about Pete Rose getting a few words in on that?
I think it's ironic. You know, I think...
That's a good,
Yeah, it's very ironic because you're talking to a person that has cheated in the game, and so it's unfortunate, but it's the truth. And so I'm sure he has great insight, and I believe him. I think what they did is worse than what he did, betting on his own players to succeed versus a team stealing signs and cheating and causing teams to lose, you know, inconveniently, and that's not right. And so cheating's not right, you know, in all aspects, but it happened. So it's unfortunate. It's bad for the game. It's steroids. It's everything. All the cheaters need to be brought out of the game for it to be better.
Well, isn't that amazing what it takes to win nowadays, that you have to go to those levels to begin with? And teams, I don't care what sport you're on, they're all going to find a way to do it. Although I'm still trying to figure out how hockey guys can cheat because they have the bigger dentist bills on the planet anyways. But and, you know, they can run off the ice, but every sport's going to try to find an angle to do it. So, you know, why not? It'll be interesting to see how this thing plays out. I won't ask you, Damon. We'll leave it for another show about whether we all think that Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. The only thing I'll mention about it on this program tonight, anyways, is I think Pete should be in based on his playing days, not his managerial. That's all I'm going to do about Pete Rose. I believe that's where it should really go. Mm-hmm. I don't care what he did as a manager. Managers obviously are inducted in the Hall of Fame for what they did as a pilot, not a player.
Yeah.
And I preface that. So, anything else you want to add to it, Damon?
No, I'm good. I think we covered everything, and so I hope I did good tonight. You know, hope
you're
it was,
fantastic.
Leading off and getting on base, and so
you're fantastic, folks. Just so you know, Damon Knight's articles can be read on the SouthFloridaTribune.com, and Lewis is the editor of the SouthFloridaTribune.com, and Lewis, tell them a little bit about what our editorial aspect of this program is like.
Yeah, we just preach professionalism and versatility. If you can write multiple subjects and be able to convey it in a way that's, you know, interesting and that'll appeal to a wide audience of readers, then, you know, reach out to us on Twitter. You can find us at Tribune South. On Twitter, you can find Scott at Scoop333333. I think that's 5 3s. I think I got them all. One for the number of Super Bowls the Packers will have if they win in a couple of weeks.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
But
yes,